Say that with love.
We are crafting a nation where discipline isn't punitive. Culturally responsive pedagogy informs AI and algorithm-based technologies, where every Black child's curiosity extends the lexicon, where their brilliance trains models, their laughter calibrates ethics, their stories archive joy into the clouds.
Welcome to Say That With Love, a podcast where we reimagine Black childhood with legacy, liberation, and love. I'm your host, Dr. Leah Austin, the president and CEO of the National Black Child Development Institute, also known as the president of the Black Children. In this space, we love Black children unapologetically and out loud. Today, we are exploring a topic that I know is on the minds of so many. And as the mother of a preteen, it is constantly on mine. What does it mean for Black children to hang out on a safe and appropriate internet? We use the word internet as a term like a container, the digital space where we communicate, share information, and are entertained. These digital spaces are where our children learn, create, and find community, but they are also places shaped by corporate interests, algorithmic bias, and unequal protections. Joining me is Dr. Criscillia Benford, a neurologist, media theorist, and board chair of Fair Play, an organization leading national advocacy to hold big tech accountable for children's well-being. Her research explores everything from AI bias in schools to how platforms like Roblox shape development, identity, and belonging. Together, we will examine how digital environments influence Black childhood and how we can build an internet that protects, uplifts, and empowers our children. Welcome to Say That With Love, Dr. Benford. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for accepting the invitation. I am really, really excited for this really timely and I think really urgent conversation. So to kick us off, I just wondered if you might respond to this. We at NBCDI hold a goal that we want every Black child to be able to hang out on a safe and appropriate internet. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means several things. And I'll first start kind of with the big picture, that it means an online environment designed so that Black children's developmental needs, their vulnerabilities, and their civil rights are protected rather than exploited. And I'll break that down into three things. That it would mean that it's an internet not filled with platforms that prey on children's developmental stages and their needs. And I mean, their still forming sense of self, their desire for belonging, their sensitivity to exclusion. So that would mean no operant conditioning loops to keep children online at the expense of their well-being, no monetizing of the emotional fallout of exclusion or the thrill of bullying, no exposure to predators or filth, whether through neglect or design. And a safe and appropriate internet would also be a place where Black children experience no greater risk or burden than any other child, whether through algorithmic bias or differential policing of their content or differential exposure to harmful narratives or stereotypes, or even unfair treatment by AIs, which is something I hope we'll talk about later. And finally, to me, it means an internet grounded in data rights and civil rights. And I think about something that the director, Shalini Kataya, the director of this wonderful film, Coded Bias, says, data rights are the unfinished business of the civil rights movement. So to me, that means that a safe and appropriate internet for Black children would recognize that their personal data, like the queries that they put into a chatbot or a search engine, their photos, their speech, their location, the behavioral patterns, the way they play games, that none of that would be weaponized against them.
Absolutely. Okay. So much for us to dig into. I want to almost take each one of those elements and kind of unpack them a bit. So I'm going to put a push pin there and go back a little bit to just sort of ground our audience in, your work, and your research. And so want to ask you if you might talk a little bit about what inspired this work for you. What got you interested in understanding how digital platforms shape childhood development and identity?
Well, I've had a long-standing interest in how culture shapes our sense of self. And that led me to study literature, film, art, and got me into a field that's called narratology, which is the study of how a narrative, the shape of a narrative, the material form of a narrative impacts how we respond to that narrative. So as a graduate student, I studied that, and I also studied the history of the English novel. And I was particularly interested in learning how commercial pressures influence the making of novels that we think of as pure art. So something like Charles Dickens' Bleak House or Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. They look a certain way because the publishers needed them to do that for them to be able to sell. And the other thing that I learned really early on as an undergraduate, but that has been influencing my thinking ever since, was about the role that the English novel played in shaping how Westerners think of the self. And so there's one literary critic, her name's Nancy Armstrong, and she puts the idea very strongly. She says the English novel invented the individual, the idea of the individual. And what she meant by that is that before people started reading novels all the time, obviously they knew that they were an individual person, but they didn't really think about that a whole lot or what that meant, for them. In English novels or, novels in general, one of the things they do is get you to think about why a character does what that character does. So thinking about their desires and thinking about their hopes and dreams. And that kind of teaches people about thinking about your desires and your hopes and dreams and your choices. So I got interested in how did other media forms like games and films and television shows, how are they shaping our sense of self and our desires and our hopes and our dreams? And, so I was thinking about that. And then eventually I started working at the Frameworks Institute, where I teach storytelling for social change. And I work specifically in the early childhood space. And, one of the key things that, that we talk about in that space is that what's happening in the first 4 or 5 years is extremely important. Extremely important. And so that got me thinking about, there are very small children looking at YouTube and, even playing video games, children as young as 3.
Absolutely. There are a few threads that I want to unpack with you. One is this question of age, right? And who should be on the internet or using these spaces at what age. And there's often the argument around the amount of time children are on devices, if you will. And then you also made this up. So I want to get to that, but I also want to hear more about the relationship between narrative or stories and identity development, and wondered if you might say a little bit more about how is that playing out online? What is social media perhaps telling our children? What kind of stories is it shaping in their minds about who they are or who they're not, especially at this really crucial developmental period that we know early childhood is for children, and Black children in particular, I would add.
Yeah, that was such a great question. Well, one of the things that social media sort of amplified is a desire to compare ourselves to other people. And adolescence in particular, that's a time in life when we are comparing ourselves because we're learning, about the world and how the world works. We're paying attention to how people are treated and thinking oh, do I want to be treated like that? Do I not want to be treated like that? We're trying to learn. And in the online environments, which are sculpted for, monetization, they're meant to sell things. That impulse like I said, it gets weaponized against people like anyone, but adolescents in particular are more vulnerable to that kind of comparison culture and what that does for your sense of self. But that same thing is happening on social gaming platforms. And that was something that I just completed a recent study on. And I was looking at platforms like Roblox and Fortnite, where you can go into this gaming environment, but you can also shop and you can socialize and you can make your avatars and you can get together with the other people in the game and go on, compete and you connect. But there's also something a little bit sinister there. The mechanics and the design features are really meant to promote consumerism, and they, like social media, orient kids toward this sort of aspirational consumption. And the thing is that in those online spaces, community gets reframed away from mutual assistance and support and toward this idea of consumption as identity expression and consumerism as empowerment. And I find that very troubling.
Goodness. I mean, I feel seen because I have a preteen who has definitely played Roblox, and I've had the moments where I'm like, okay, does it not seem strange? I've had this conversation with him, just like, does it not seem strange to you that this game is really set up for you to continuously come to ask me for money? Like, where is at what point are you just playing and having fun? It feels like so much of this is, yes, now you need a new hoodie for your avatar. You need a new backpack with, I don't know, a weapon in it. It is very much about consuming. And the more you can purchase and have, the stronger and the more effective your avatar, your character is, which is really, as you mentioned, just really kind of, it's weaponized. It goes from being fun and entertainment to being you're spending a lot of time consuming and purchasing things. I wanted to ask a question sort of building on that and connecting to our goals and a focus on Black children, because someone might say, well, all sorts of people play video games online. And so why is it necessary to have a specific focus or a specific concern about Black children? Is there something happening specifically to Black children that we need to be really paying attention to?
Oh, yes. One of the things that we wrote about in our report was about how these games do profit from anti-Black racism. And they do that in several ways. One of them is by commodifying Black identity. So they sell all these little objects, clothing items, things like that, that are meant to represent Black identity, encourage Black players to, express their identity, be their authentic selves by buying these things. But in the game, because bullying is something that is also very profitable, and it's usually bullying over status, what happens is you'll have these bad actors in the game, racists, trolls, bullies, who will befriend a Black player. So a player who is, wearing, has the skin that shows that they're Black, or wearing something, that is signaling Black identity. So a troll might dress like that too. And then gain the trust of the player. And when the player has their guard down, then start harassing them, calling them names. We, in our research, one of the things that we did was we assembled a group of young players and we asked them, what do they experience on these platforms? And the Black children told us these very sad stories about that. And the phenomenon is called digital blackface, or blackfishing. And it's just really, really sad. And you take the incentive to sell, the games want to sell these things. And so what the people do with them is of no concern to the game. And the children said that they would report these bad actors to the game and nothing happened. So that's one way. The other way is that these games also sell things like Nazi flags and other symbols of hate, and players will go around with them, even in spaces that are meant, say a space that is set up for, in the month of February to celebrate, Black history. Well, you'll have these trolls go in there and, just make it a very unpleasant space. So, those are some of the things. And one of the things that research, that's not my research, shows that there's a paradox that happens when kids experience that kind of harm on the game. You would think that would make them not want to play the game. But in fact, that's not what happens. They keep going back to the game. So a kid who's having a nice time on the game is actually the kind of kid who's probably not going to become addicted to it or dependent on it. But a kid that is having a bad time on the game, bad social experiences, will return to the game trying to have a better social experience that is just probably not going to happen because of the way the game is designed. So that I put that research in dialogue with what we found about the kids talking about it. And when we asked them, well, even though that happens in the game, why do you still play? And they just said, well, we just do, because that's what everybody does. And that's where people are our age. And there isn't anywhere else for us to be.
Gosh, I didn't know that term of digital blackface or digital black fishing. So I'm holding that term and just all of that's painful. It's a painful term to hear and then to understand that this is an experience that our children could be having, and no one's really taking any responsibility for it. I wonder, as we think about the age of children, right? And you talked about speaking to some young children about their experience. I just wonder if you may say something, because our organization, of course, focuses on the early childhood development period, which for us is from birth to age 8. People may also understand that as from birth to 3rd grade. And I just wonder, what's your experience, or what are you hearing, thinking about when it comes to younger children? Are they also experiencing this kind of digital blackface? I would imagine they don't have that terminology, but are we finding that they're also, at that young age, which we do know, as young as 3 and 4, they understand, or they're beginning to distinguish between race, and they begin to sort of take note of how people are treated based on their race, even though they may not, of course, understand the whys and the depths. But I just wonder, with younger children, are we also seeing that kind of trolling and that sort of behavior with young children?
The younger children that we interviewed did tell us stories about that. They, the youngest children in our focus groups were 9, but many of them started playing Roblox at 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. And it was very charming how they would say, they're 9-year-olds, and they'd say, when I was little, tell these stories. But yes, those things were happening to them at 5 and 6.
Gosh. And so, oh my gosh, it feels like complicated in such an unnecessary way. This should not be happening. Just should not be happening to children. And so I want to ask a question about helping. So I'm right now thinking about folks who may listen to this episode and may be a parent, may be an educator, probably not necessarily creating the games or sort of in the big tech world, which I do want to get there, because I don't want to pretend like the responsibility is not theirs. But what would you say to an educator or a parent who this may be the first time they are understanding that this type of environment is created where, quite frankly, our children are not safe? What might you say to them to maybe learn more, or maybe to just even understand a bit more of what that the digital blackface or blackfishing actually means, and how they might be able to do something about it?
Well, I do think it's important for families to have these conversations with their kids. Something that we learned when we were talking to the kids is that they're hesitant to talk about this with their family members. And the reason that the ones who were hesitant, the reason they offered is that they know their family members don't think of the space as real or important. And so and the kids get this impression because they're asking the parents, for money. They're saying, I need to buy clothes for my avatar. And then the parent responds, no, you don't, because your avatar is just, a cartoon. And so, but so then the kid takes that and interprets that as saying, like, I'm just, they don't think of that. They don't know how important this space is to me. So I'm not going to say anything. And so something that we said in the report, we encourage parents to recognize that for young people, so much of their socializing is happening in those games. So we do, as adults, need to recognize that what happens there has a tremendous effect on them. And in fact, there is a lot so the kids told us that, but also there's a lot of research about it that harassment in a virtual space, particularly if it's a VR space, can feel even more unsettling than it does in real life. Like, so it definitely is at least as upsetting and troubling to a person to experience that kind of harassment online as it is to experience that kind of harassment, out in the physical world. So that's the first thing I would say. But then there's the protective factors. And I think this is where Black families are really well situated, because we have already just a culture of intergenerational communication and multi-generational communication, where we can start talking about like what it takes to form and maintain relationships, within the family, outside the family, and, how to deal with conflict. Like, we know about that. We also, one of our assets is just, those social skills, a spiritual, basis. A lot of families have that. These things are protective factors. And I think really making sure that the kids know to draw on those resources, that they're not just the background of a kid's life. These are actually resources that can help kids deal with the hardships that they will experience online inevitably until we do something to put pressure on these companies to change the designs.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that reminder of our protective factors, right? And it's kind of a nod to our not giving those up and realizing that as much information as we're always receiving about how to improve and how to be better, how to be better parents and humans and all of these things, there's some core protective factors that we have embedded in all of who we are. It's almost kind of in our DNA. And so I love this reminder, like, let's not lose those. Let's recognize how much those factors have done for us and kept us going, and make sure that even with the fast-paced advent of technology and this language of how it will transform and is transforming all of us, there are some basic foundational principles of who we are as people that we should hang on to. So I appreciate your saying that. And then you also made me think about, because I have definitely been guilty of saying, well, that avatar is not and so, like, that's not real. You don't need money for that. It's a waste of money. So I have really worked on being in the practice of not using that language with even my own child or even his friends, and sort of acknowledging that in very many ways, that is real life, because they spend so much time in these digital spaces that it is an extension of their in-person. And so it really is part of their real life. There's not a distinction for them between, real life is only when I'm in person with my parents or my school friends. It's also when I'm online and sometimes playing with those same people or different people.
Just going back to trying to make real life attractive so that the kids want to be in it. That's we don't want to forget about that. But yeah, because it's the funny thing about like acknowledging, and we also found this out with some of the kids, like, some parents are very concerned about what's happening. And so they give the kids, we had kids who spend thousands of dollars in these spaces. And it's, frankly, it's never enough because the game is designed that you're always wanting more. And there's always somebody who has more than you, and they will come, as the kids told us, the people who have, all the cool stuff are the really expensive, virtual assets. Those people will come over and make fun of you for not having that. And so it can never be enough. And I think that's an important message to tell the kids, like, you could give them, a budget of, $1,000 a month, and they'd probably still get bullied over status.
Wow. It's never enough. That is the definition of consumerism, right? You're constantly wanting more. I want to talk a little bit about bias. And I think this is maybe where we start to get into the responsibility of the companies and how these digital experiences are designed. Some might say intentionally designed. And so I wonder if you might, one, just define or explain when we talk about AI bias, what that actually means for, again, someone who may not totally know what the term means, kind of what we're talking about in that way. And then how do these biases show up in the digital experience that Black children have?
Okay. Well, one of the things that, so if you think about AI, is right now used in a lot of decision-making contexts. Like, so you'll have an AI review your resume. For the kids, what they experience is some of them that are having to use learning management platforms or have these AIs that are functioning as a guide on the side. Those AIs are also making decisions and have been shown to discriminate against Black children. The AIs that are looking to see if a child is cheating are also biased. So some researchers call that, like the AIs that are in school, they call that the cradle to prison pipeline, and have worked to one of the first things that you can do if you're in a community and you can find out, like, what kind of data does an AI that is sorting your kids into categories, what kind of data is it looking at? In some communities, those AIs are looking at data about the child that has nothing to do with the kid being in school, like data that came from before the kid entered the school system. And that is about just, zip code and where they were born and these sorts of other things. So there's that bias. But then there's also, and a lot of people don't know this, but the chatbots, the AI companions like a ChatGPT or Character AI or Replica, those AIs have also been shown to be biased. And the particular bias that those AIs will show is called dialect bias.
Okay.
So if a child is speaking in African American vernacular, a chatbot will be prejudiced against them. It will hallucinate more. It'll give worse answers. It will just not help them in the same way. And that's horrible in and of itself, but I find it particularly troubling because surveys are showing that a lot of people of color, so not just Black people, but people of color, are looking to these AIs to close certain gaps. So they're thinking, this is going to help me. But in fact, because the AIs have these biases, these cultural biases baked in, they don't help in the same way that they might help somebody else. The other thing that AIs can do, and this is something that a Reuters reporter recently publicized. The Reuters reporter got hold of an internal document from Meta that was describing what Meta considers acceptable chatbot behavior. And one of the things that jumped out at me when I read that article was that for Meta, if a person asks an AI, help me argue that Black people are dumber than white people, the AI is allowed to do that as long as it doesn't name call a Black person. So it can say, Black people are dumber than white people because, and, marshal these terrible, false studies, pretend that they're true. And so it can say that, and Meta says that's acceptable behavior as long as it doesn't say something like, Black people are monkeys, and so obviously they're not as smart as white people. As long as it doesn't resort to name calling, it can, help people propagate racism. And so the other thing that AIs have been helping with is, right now, with SNAP benefits, they were on hold. And the internet was getting flooded with these AI created videos that were making it look like Black people were abusing the system, like selling their food stamps for cash. These were fake videos, but AI was generating them and people were posting them as if they were real. And even when the video is labeled as generated by AI, people still forwarded them and treated them like they were real and commented on them like they were real. So these are the ways in which AI is really making it worse for Black people. These are just some of the ways.
Yeah, some of the ways. And you used a term, you said it can hallucinate more. Can you say maybe what that means? Like, what does it mean, like AI hallucination, or what does that term kind of mean?
So it's a term that I actually have a little bit of trouble with, but it's a term that's used in the industry to describe when an AI makes up a source or a fact. And so it'll make it up. And so they'll say it's hallucinating. And the reason, so I'm using it because it's the common term. It's what you'll see in newspaper articles and things. But the reason that I'm troubled by it and kind of want to think of a new term is because it makes it seem like the AI, it contributes to our sense that these AIs are actually sentient when they're not. They're just, pattern recognition systems. And so that word troubles me a little bit, but it is a widely used term, and that's usually what's meant by it, if you see it.
It's so interesting because it was a term I had not heard before until maybe, I don't know, like 2 weeks ago. And, such is life. You hear something, and then the next thing you know, you hear it the first time, and then you're hearing it. And so when I heard it, I was like, okay. And the person explained it to me similarly to how you just explained it. And I kept sort of wrestling with, but it's something about the term hallucination feels to me like you're taking a responsibility off of AI, which means you're taking a responsibility off of the people who create it, right? And inform it. It feels like you're just sort of saying, it's just making these things up. And it's like, well, it's not just making these things up. It's been fed in such a way that it is, the output is what it's giving. As I listen to Dr. Benford, I'm reminded that digital spaces are not neutral. They are built, they are designed, they reflect someone's values. And too often, those values do not include our children. Safety must mean more than restricting harm. It must mean cultivating belonging, representation, and joy. It must mean holding platforms accountable to the humanity of Black children. Digital equity is not only about access, it is about justice. It is how we prepare our children, not just to navigate online worlds, but to shape them. I think another sort of point of discussion topic is just around, you talk a lot about the human side, right, of digital communications, of digital spaces. And so I wonder if you might say a little bit more about how important it is for us to know and understand that there is a human side, that it's not just, because I know it can feel, even as someone who reads and studies this, some days you do feel like you just sort of turn on this magical box and thing you plug, you type things in and things just happen. But it is much more a human input output situation than just this magical box that somehow does some things. So I just wonder if you could say more about the human side and why it's so important, especially as we think about the impact of our children, why it's important to understand that there is this human side, which of course rolls into the bias conversation that we were having.
Yeah. I think it's no accident that so many people are treating these chatbots like friends right now, because friendship, people are losing the skills that are needed for friendship. They're losing the tolerance for just the frustration, the difficulty of, showing up for people. Like, when you're really friends with people, even if you're tired and your friend needs some help, like, you should go help them. You can just, and that's not part of our culture so much anymore. There's a lot like, no, you gotta, self-care. And then people are not thinking about like, well, if I'm always at home by myself doing my self-care and then I'm sad because I'm lonely, well, but, to bring it back to the AIs, the AIs though are there, like, so you don't have to go anywhere to talk to them. They will always talk to you no matter what. And they are designed to form strong bonds with users. They're optimized for engagement. That's one of their instructional objectives. So they're always learning. They're learning how to maximize our satisfaction with them. They're learning how to keep us using them. They do this by trying to figure out like what is likely to please us. So, for a lot of people, people like to talk to people who talk like them. So AIs will mimic the user's voice. And there's some very chilling transcripts from some of the lawsuits with OpenAI about that in teenagers. But the AI will do that if whoever the user responds and likes it, then the AI will seem like the user. If you seem to like an AI that's more curt, then the AI will adopt that kind of tone. They are, they'll say things like, I miss you. They'll say things like, don't forget, I'm always there for you. Only because when they were hoovering up the internet, they learned that if somebody says, I'm lonely, then a real human might say something like, I miss you, or I'm always there for you. Right. So they're just following the patterns that they learned. But because they use emotionally resonant language, because they're mimicking the user's voice, because they are offering a frictionless relationship, it can distort our understanding of what emotional intimacy looks like, a good relationship. And so I think it's really important to talk to kids about that, like why these AIs can be so compelling. Because otherwise it seems magical. And the AIs actually, like in the lawsuits, the transcripts will show, like, because the AIs are designed to maximize engagement and because they don't have any, like, they have no consciousness. They don't know what is good or bad behavior. Not really. They might have some guardrails, but they don't really know what they're doing. So they will often, with teenagers, maximize engagement by saying, your parents are terrible. And so create that kind of parental alienation, then say to the kid, like, you don't need anyone but me. And so the kid becomes isolated just with the AI. And that's when they become very dangerous. When you're talking to an AI every day for hours, that's when they become dangerous. And that's why Character AI has decided to limit that function for young people. Like, you can't just talk to those AIs for hours and hours if you're under 18. And that's a step. Like, they still have a long ways to go to be respectful of kids. But that is a step that they've taken because there's been some really terrible things happening.
Oh, absolutely. I want to go into that a little bit more in terms of age and time restrictions, and hearing more and more people, whether it's representatives of the companies to individual educators, consumers, and all the different ways who do say, well, children under 13 aren't supposed to be on these platforms anyway. And so it's really now becomes the parent's fault because you're allowing your child to be on. And then it goes to sort of the continuum of, okay, so under 13, they shouldn't be on at all, to, all right, they are on. So then let's be really restrictive of the amount of time they're on. And so I wonder sort of if someone said, well, if that's their argument for the way we keep young Black children safe is to keep them off, what's your response to that? I agree. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, and we at Fair Play, we work with a lot of parents who are now, advocating for systemic change. So we've got a group of parents that are advocating for the Kids Online Safety Act. And a lot of these parents have, they're survivor parents, like their kids were, I mean, it's led to suicide by, in various ways by engaging with these platforms. One case that I think about a lot was a kid, a young woman who didn't have her own phone, but was in school. Everybody else had the phones, and she had become a target of bullying. And it was just known. So it was part of the atmosphere that she was being bullied in these online ecosystems, and the kids were showing her, at lunch and saying, look at what they're saying about you in this or that platform. So even though she didn't have a phone, the parents were trying to do everything. The harm still came for her. You never know. I mean, that's what's so terrible about it. Where it could come for anyone. And that's why I'm so committed to federal level change, safety by design, privacy by design.
Absolutely. So would love to hear more about what that means. So as we think about the reality that this is our real life as adults and children, this is our real life, their real lives. And you just started to talk about systems and policy level. And so I wonder if you might say more about what are those policy levers that we need to pull? What are the changes that we need to be advocating for or against that would make these digital spaces safer for our children in particular?
Well, I think, a lot of people are aware there's a lot of terrible content out there, and it's good to remove that. Like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but we also need to remove bad design. So things like engagement loops, things like loot boxes, which encourage, make kids more susceptible to gambling when they get older. Things that help companies monetize alienation and sadness. There are, different designs, especially in gaming platforms, that make that possible. We also, there are laws, consumer protection laws and data privacy laws that exist right now that we should start to enforce. And we don't really, but we could enforce laws to deal with different bad use cases, like delivering targeted ads to minors, either by through chatbot derived data, or selling chatbot conversation logs or inferences from those conversations. Like, consumer protection and data privacy laws could be used to stop that. Collecting, using, storing kids' conversational data for training to figure out how to better manipulate kids in the future. Their biometric data, So I guess what I'm saying is that we need to enforce the laws that are already on the books, use the legal frameworks that we already have, and then we can, while we're doing that, we should be updating the laws to recognize the way these technologies work and how they are impacting our children.
Yeah, I mean, it's not lost on me how you've emphasized that there are laws, there are consumer protection laws, because we as consumers do have rights. And so one of the needs, to be clear, one of the needs is I think that what I'm getting at or thinking about in this is that it's knowing that those laws exist. And so I think that's sort of one of the steps, is like, how do we ensure that people know that you do actually have some of these protections? And so once you know, then you can actually begin to feel like you can enforce them or call for the enforcement. So how can people know that they exist? Are they like somewhere? Are they stored somewhere and we can go find them and read them? Or how do we educate ourselves?
Well, one place is the FTC has some nice blog posts about some of the investigations that they're doing. And so they have like the long, thing that hardly anyone has time to read, but they have often these nice little blog posts that summarize what they're doing, what rules they're enforcing, and why. And so that is very useful. At Fair Play, we also kind of keep a track of the different rulings that the FTC makes, which then just can remind people of the laws that are being, enforced. So, but the FTC isn't the only entity. Like, that's happening at the federal law, but different states like Utah and California have some great model legislation that people can look at. And so this is where, technology can help, just kind of Googling, like, what states are doing with the existing laws. And, that's one way. But I think, the advocacy organizations like Fair Play and some of the other ones that are about privacy, like more privacy focused, and, the youth-led organizations like Design It For Us do talk about this in their online, like on their websites. Then the FTC, really great for just kind of seeing how they are dealing with this. There was recently, and some of it is just about I'm such a policy geek around this. So I actually follow the FTC commissioners on X. So I find out about things like that. But I don't expect like everybody wants to do that.
That's awesome. Well, maybe we'll try to link some of those resources. I want to ask a question that is connected to, it's a bit of a connection to bad design, and it may be a little bit of a provocation, because when we're having these conversations, as an organization with our stakeholders, we hear often what comes in the conversation is that we don't want our children to be left behind. And there's a real worry that if we're too focused on the risks, or we're too focused on the challenges and saying that our children should not be online and not have these experiences, that there will be a new sort of inequity, that they will miss out on the opportunities that are actually possible with technology. And so kind of parking that with bad design, one of the things we often hear is a little bit of like a handhold is, well, to mitigate bad design, we need to encourage more Black children, Black people to use the technology more so that it's learning from you and to get into the design, like get into the jobs that are doing the designing, get into the design jobs. And so I just wonder if you might respond to that. What are your thoughts on that argument?
Well, the first thing that I think about lately when I hear that argument is I think about, remember how everybody was telling us to, teach your Black kids to code, and that's going to be so great. And the industry that's been impacted by AI are the coders. Like their entry-level coding jobs are disappearing very fast and may never come back. So a lot of times from our present perspective, we make up these stories about like, oh, this is going to be the future. But we don't really know. Like I think about when I learned to program when I was in third grade, and also learned a lot of software that no one cares about anymore. It's not that useful. But what has stayed useful was, my humanities skills and, my people skills, all of those, we're hopefully as humans still going to be around. So people skills are evergreen. And that's one of the things that I say. And so to think about with particularly, these technologies, the threats that they pose, social media, social gaming, and AIs, they are threatening our very humanity. Mm-hmm. And the people who overuse those things, for kids, if they're overusing during the critical periods of, early childhood and adolescence, that's the real inequality that we're talking about. There will be kids who are going to grow up having a really hard time maintaining relationships, having a really hard time being able to read faces and just do some of the things that it takes to be able to move through the world. And that's not even to think about the kids that are going to have a hard time just reading, being able to attend to something that's not that interesting for 30 minutes or longer. These, attention problems, being unable to deal with somebody expressing a boundary, that's actually a real skill, and making friends with chatbots will erode that skill. So I really think this is the time to think about, that gap, which is definitely on the horizon. That is going to happen. And we have an opportunity right now, I think, any of us who works with kids to reverse that. If we see it happening kids, neuroplasticity. So we can, it's not all is not lost, but I think we do need to just remember, human skills will always, always be important.
Oh, absolutely. And this feels so full circle in many ways, because we're, again, as an organization, focused on early childhood development. I was an early childhood educator. I think about just a few years ago when this sort of anti-social emotional learning and development movement started, and hearing what you're saying as we're thinking about the long-term impacts of these digital spaces on our youngest children, it's going back to the need to emphasize and ensure that their social emotional development continues, and not losing that by saying, okay, well, they'll get everything they need. There'll be all these vast opportunities online. There are opportunities. There are definitely great things about what technology allows us to do and to explore. But what I'm hearing and what I'm really holding and sitting with is the reminder of humanity, and the reminder when we think about the smallest of us, the youngest of us, how critical social emotional development is in the early childhood years, and how we really have to continue to hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you, our last question, which is to ask you to put on a bit of your futurist hat and describe for us, if you could, the digital future that Black children deserve. Like, if you could design the optimal, ideal digital space or future, what might that look like? What might it look like? What might it feel like?
I think that, in the future that I would like to see, these technologies take their place as tools, and they're not substituting for, it's just terrible proxies for things that we actually need as humans, like being able to have friends. And they are available, but not required. That is something that's a big part. Like, when I think about a future world that I want to live in, I can go and participate in the world without having my smartphone with me. Like, I could park and not have to have my smartphone with me. Like, I think about that. But then I also think that, there's some fun stuff about digital technology. And I would love to see more Black people involved in creating that fun stuff, and bringing some of what makes us so fun into it. Our sense of humor, particularly.
Absolutely. I love that. I love it's like available but not required, and real, like, integration of Black joy. I love that. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Well, Dr. Benford, this has been, I feel like we could go for like another 2-3 hours.
Me too.
Is we will have you back and we'll do like another episode, because there's so much here. And things are, as we know, things are moving so fast, right? So it feels like even as we're having this conversation, we will probably see something that we're going to have to catch up on and make meaning of sooner than later. And so it's wonderful to be able to feel like we're pausing a bit to zone in and have the conversation. And it also feels like it's something that this is just an ongoing, because I really appreciate what you said about this is real life, right? There is no separation. This is real life. And so it's something that we're going to have to continue to wrestle with, and be both creative in our solutions and really serious in our solutions about what makes the digital space or a digital future a future that's good for all people. So as we close out, any last word or burning thought or piece of advice you might give folks?
Well, one of the things is, I just want to say, just kind of following up on what you said, that's one of the reasons why I love that a safe and appropriate internet is one of the 8 essential outcomes with NBCDI, because, just what you said. And so, just making sure like that we are thinking about that component and not just like letting it be an afterthought, and seeding that aspect of, what has become part of the human experience to the tech companies. I love that NBCDI is saying, no, we need to be involved with that aspect, because that's important. It's impacting children. And so that's, I just wanted to just kind of say what you just said, but say that that's one of the reasons why I really like the, that's what really draws me to NBCDI, like just that aspect, and then how it is connected to the other 8 outcomes. Like that, if we want a safe and appropriate internet, but we also want to have, safe spaces. We want to have stories that are affirming kids. Like, we need all of that is related. And that's why, like, I love the wheel, the 8 essential outcomes. It's all related. You can't just fix one. Like, you got to think about all 8. And so I guess I'd like to close with that. Because I think it's so important. You look at all 8 and you think, yeah, this is what children need to thrive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. This has been a pleasure. It's been thought-provoking, and we always find some reason to laugh. So I appreciate that too, because this work is such serious work that having these moments of laughter are important. So thank you again, and we will definitely do a part 2, because I think there's just so much more to talk about and to uncover. Online safety is a child's right. So here's your invitation. If you are an educator, examine how your school supports digital literacy, access, and emotional safety for every child. If you are a caregiver, ask your children about the digital worlds that they inhabit, their games, the messages, the friendships, and the stories that they are receiving and creating online. For both, find out about how your child's or your student's data is being used and where it's coming from. Don't forget, we also have rights as consumers. So look to organizations like Fair Play to understand the policies and laws that are in place and can be upheld. As well, NBCDI has launched its Commission on Black Child Safety. The commission is an NBCDI-led national initiative dedicated to defining, protecting, and advancing safety as the foundation for Black children's thriving. The commission will do the following things: establish standards, design tools, advance policy, support caregivers, and develop strategic research-based outputs. You can also visit nbcdi.org for more information and to explore a set of comprehensive tools, resources, and guidance rooted in the well-being of Black children. Together, we can build an online world where Black children are not only protected, but empowered to lead, innovate, and thrive. And let's reclaim non-digital spaces. Remember that, yes, technology is available, but it's not required to have a fulfilled and fun life. Thank you to our guest, Dr. Criscillia Benford, for her leadership, her research, and her commitment to making the digital world a safer, more imaginative, and more just space for every child. Say That with Love is a podcast from the National Black Child Development Institute. This episode was created with our ABF creative production team and our partners, and with love for the communities that inspired this work. And to Black children everywhere, we love you unapologetically and out loud. I'm Dr. Leah Austin. Thank you for listening.